Greetings. We're here in south central Washington state in mid-November after the ants have gone underground for winter. We're looking at the Stonehenge War Memorial. This was built after World War I to celebrate peace and commemorate the sacrifice of war. Why Stonehenge? Okay, well, the founder at the time, the guy who built this, commissioned it, Sam Hill was his name. He thought that Stonehenge was used for ritual sacrifice, and so he thought the sacrifice of war was a parallel and thought, okay, we'll do Stonehenge. And so it's supposed to be an exact replica of what Stonehenge originally was. It isn't astronomically aligned like Stonehenge, so you can't use it for solstice observations, which would be kind of cool, but you can still come here on the solstice, just in the spirit of Stonehenge. But this isn't really meant to be in the spirit of Stonehenge so much as in the spirit of peace and commemorating those who gave everything in the name of war. And you see over here, they've got a memorial, some nice placards celebrating each of the branches and all the wars. And it can be a rather impactful place, depending on how you feel about things. War is costly. It doesn't matter if you're for it or against it. You have to admit it's extremely costly, and the money is not even remotely a consideration. It's always in terms of human life. And it affects all of us. And it doesn't just affect us during the wartime, it affects us for years later. Obviously, this was built before World War II had even happened. And they were already saying, enough, we've given enough. You know, how many millions of lives had to be given to get through World War I. And World War II came around and all the horrors came back even more. And those horrors affected everybody, even yours truly. I have a great uncle who died in a B-24 Liberator crash in a bombing raid over Germany. The ordnance on the plane exploded on impact, and there was nothing left to bury for any of the families. That's only one of a handful of incredibly tragic stories. I have family members who served in World War II, Vietnam, Korea, Iraq. And even the costs of those wars are being felt now with obviously the horrific battlefield injuries. But the costs of older wars are still here. And this is no stranger, or no exception, I should say, just upstream of our good old Columbia River. For the Manhattan Project in World War II, the Hanford nuclear reservation was built, and they were making uranium for bombs, including the ones that were used on humans. And that toxic legacy has polluted that river, this river, for decades afterwards, and it's unfortunately one of the most polluted rivers in the country, thanks to that, in part to that. And so we are still paying the price of World War II, not just in mourning, you know, my great uncle, who I never got to meet, but Mother Nature, who's had to take a nice long-term hit as well. So it's not just families, you know, it's not just the battlefield, wounded, it's the long-term cost of war. And so it's important to come out to places like this and really think deeply about, you know, what we've spent and what it's cost and whether it really was worth it. But then, of course, Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, 2003 invasion, Afghanistan, the list kind of goes on, and the toll starts to become a bit more than a decent human being can live with. So I always tell people, come out to places like this. There's a lot going on in terms of history, and you can learn a lot about where we came from, what it cost to get here. You may recall me just on the other side of those big white things. There's a spot where the Oregon Trail actually came down, and that's where it first met the Columbia River, right here. That's where the Oregon Trail first met the Columbia River. The Deschutes River is just a little bit downstream. You can almost make out the bridge at the river mouth. I've taken you there before. But people went through insane toil and hardship to get here to try and make a better life for themselves. And so I was always trying to remind people, there are thousands of people who walked barefoot the entire way. And so going barefoot for a little bit, taking a little bit of hardship to yourself, you can kind of get an idea of what it really took to get what we've got. Coming to places like this where you can see that mix of, here's the Columbia River with its legacy from the Manhattan Project, and the Oregon Trail that ultimately led us to here. And now we've got so many dead bodies piled up from war that we have memorials all over the place. Even these seemingly remote and rural locations. The highway here, as you come across into Washington, is the World War II Veterans Memorial Highway. People care still, and it's really important that we do not forget. So while you're out on the road, in between your hikes and my hikes, all my cool adventures in the gorges and on the hillsides and out in the landscapes, in between them, there's places like this so you can come and get some perspective, get it brought a little bit back down to reality. And so I want to thank you so much for taking just a few quick minutes here to join me while I look at this sort of interesting spot, the Stonehenge War Memorial in south central Washington State. The train horns sound. Time to end it. Shut up and get on with your day. But remember what it took to get here, what it cost, and make sure that it was worth it. Because people died by the millions so that we could have what we have now. Just make sure that they didn't die for absolutely nothing.